We're almost at the end. You seemed a little too excited about that. First, congratulations to Danielle and everyone at Food Tank. You've built a really important organization and institution for the food movement, in my view, and I think we're all grateful that you did it. So can we just give them a... It's an honor to be here with you today, and why wouldn't it be? How often do you get a chance to speak to an audience like this? Those of you who are watching online may not realize, but there may be, 10, 15,000 people here in this auditorium. Something like that. That's a fact. That's a fact. It's one of those facts. In fact, this is the biggest audience in the history of my inaugural keynotes at Food Tank. Thank you. No, thank you. No, don't. No, you don't. Come on. It's not about me. And every one of you here, all of the thousands here, and if you want to tweet that out now, Food Tank, 10 to 15,000, you have opinions about how to create a better food policy. And the question today that I have for you is, how do you bring those opinions, if you hold them with conviction, to the public square in order to share them, test them, and as a way of engaging yourself personally in the vital debates of these tempestuous times? Needless to say, the American political system is in the throes of a war of ideas, ideologies, partisan strife. Food policy will be one of the battlegrounds. I would argue one of the main battlegrounds. I've been at this for a while. This will be my 9th Farm Bill coming up. And I can tell you without hesitation that the next few years appear to me to be the most consequential of all the time I've been active in food and agriculture policy. There's every reason to believe that how those policy battles are decided will have profound effects on our food system as never before. You may have seen EWG's back and forth today with the White House over our observations about the track record of EPA nominee Scott Pruitt of Arkansas. That should give you a flavor. The debate is about chicken factory farm waste in the Illinois River, and the White House hit back at us pretty strongly for our report. Unfortunately, we had photographic evidence. Not that that matters. In my opinion, the stakes are so high that it means each of us should act today in the knowledge that we will be asked by others or will ask ourselves the simple question. It may be next year, it may be in 5 years, maybe it'll be 50 years down the road, but you'll ask yourself, I think, this question: what did I do during the great war over food policy that was truly engaged for the first time in 2017? Now, before we talk about building a better food policy, let's take a moment to celebrate the many, many features of food policy that we can be proud of in this country. And a lot of those policies are in place as a result of people who are in this room. And I want to pay special tribute to colleagues from the public interest community who have waded into policy debates increasingly. Debates, let's face it, that are dominated by big economic interests. From the subsidy lobby to agribusiness to big food, and many members of that food and agriculture establishment very openly believe that food policy should be, ought to be, of, by, and for the food industry. And everyone else should just pretty much butt out. If you don't believe that, then later in my talk, when I urge you to lobby, you'll find out soon enough. That's especially the case if those outsiders ask for anything more than the status quo, or if their asks in policy or in funding are anything other than small, and the smaller the better. But as many of you have waded in anyway, you helped push through landmark changes to food policy, many of them. You reformed food labels to make calories prominent and to alert consumers to the presence of added sugars. Landmark advances in food safety as well. We've supported farmers with a succession of safety nets that recognize the failures and imperfections of the marketplace. Now, I've been a frequent critic of how we've gone about those subsidies, but the fact that we do support farmers in need is to me a central and important victory for good food policy in this country. We've seen increasing support over the years for conservation and environmental protection in the farm bills. We've seen greater farm bill support for sustainable agriculture and for organic agriculture, whose sales, driven by consumer demand, grow by double digits most years, far faster than conventional food grows, far exceeding the rate for conventional, and that topped $43 billion in 2015, according to our friends at OTA. Now, the good news that these and other important reforms earned the support of Democrats and Republicans alike. They took work, a lot of work, for advocates of better food policy, and that is and will always be the case no matter how elections turn out. We can never take it for granted if we're pushing up against the status quo. But even as Americans have become more divided, it seems, on so many issues, food policy is one where bipartisan agreement can still be reached. And bipartisan doesn't mean one side surrenders and the other takes all. It means two sides compromise and our cause advances. But it only advances as if we go into the compromise with as much strength as we can muster, and that is where all of you come in. It's what the public expects. From our research at Food Policy Action, we know the public's bottom line, simply put, is a food system that provides access to everyone to healthy food. Access means it's available, physically, it's affordable, and healthy means it's food that makes us well, not sick. Now, there's more good news about food policy. It's becoming politicized, and I mean that in the best possible way. Now, food policy has always been a political goal, a political object for economic interests engaged in the food system. But it's also become politicized more recently by the public and by advocates. Whenever it's been on the ballot, food policy, good food policy, has almost always won. In November, we saw numerous victories to raise the minimum wage. Voters rejected a so-called right to farm law in Oklahoma that would have been antithetical to animal welfare. In Boulder, San Francisco, and Oakland, soda taxes passed. And while ballot measures on GMO labeling have not prevailed, it's been very close every time, and there have been huge turnouts for people who demand a right to know. And Vermont's labeling law drove national policy towards mandatory labels. Imperfectly, absolutely imperfectly, but it made a statement and we made progress. Now, while debates play out on specific issues, I believe that the real counter to the economic interests that logically dominate food policy debates arises not from the different positions we may take. That's important, and they're nuanced, and we could go on about, even within groups that generally agree, differences on issues. What I'm talking about is our real strength is what we take from the values we hold. So let me slip on my food policy action hat for just a moment and administer a test of sorts to the audience here, the thousands of you. It's a test of principles to determine first if there is a food movement, and secondly, if you're in it. Okay, let's go. A simple "I'm in" will suffice in response here. The food movement holds that no child should go to school or go to bed hungry, and no senior should ever have to choose between buying food and affording medicine. I'm in. Are you in? I'm in, right? The food movement insists that healthy food should be accessible physically and financially to all. Are you in? I'm in. All right. Workers in the food chain, from the smallest farms through farm workers to everyone working in between, right up to the tip of our forks. Everyone should be treated with respect, should earn a fair wage that allows them and their families to live in dignity and embrace opportunity. Are you in? You're in. Food should be safe, and policy should emphasize food as the foundation of health and healing, not a risk factor that so much of our food supply represents today for chronic diseases and skyrocketing healthcare costs. Food as medicine, what say you? Yeah. Farm animals should be treated humanely, far more so than they are today, commonly. And fisheries should be managed in harmony with natural cycles, not mined to the brink of exhaustion. Are you in? The I'm-ins have it. We have a food movement right here in this audience, and you are in it. Now, much of the policy progress that we have made, I regret to say, and much of the policy aspiration that we hold in common, whether it's improving how we manage food waste, how we deal with urban agriculture, beginning farmers, agriculture's role in the environment, the growth of organic, you fill in the blank. Many of our aspirations, I believe, are jeopardized by the types of proposals that we are seeing coming out of the new administration. There's just no two ways around it. We could see our basic consumer health, worker, and environmental protections undermined. The food movement should be profoundly concerned and prepared about the potential impacts executive orders signed to date by the President may be having already on the food system. The executive order affecting immigration, the executive order affecting regulatory reform. In both cases, those impacts could be profound, and to think otherwise is to not read those orders. Of further concern, in our view, are 5 Trump nominees who have a disturbing record on food policy issues that also ought to concern everyone in the food movement. Tom Price for HHS, Scott Pruitt for the EPA, Sonny Perdue for USDA, Andy Pudster for Labor, and Mick Mulvaney for OMB. These nominees are poised to run the agencies that will largely determine whether our food is safe and properly labeled, whether our food is grown in ways that protect the environment and farm income and workers, and whether our food and farm workers are safe and paid a living wage, and so much more, including whether some kids go to bed hungry in the United States of America. They will make decisions that determine if that happens or not. Food policy action is carefully evaluating the backgrounds of these members. We're looking at their testimony, and I can tell you that we will be informing the full Senate in the next short while here that all 5 of these nominees will be considered in our congressional scorecard for 2017 that has been referenced multiple times today. It's finally, thank you, it's finally a tool that we can have to keep track of how Congress does when they come to Washington when it comes to food policy. Now, what can you do? First, I have 1 minute. Continue voting with your dollars and your choices in the marketplace. Consumers who used to be driven by advertising and marketing are increasingly drivers of change in the food system. Cleaner menus, ingredient labels, moving toward local foods, changing the food that shows up in supermarkets large and small, moving towards healthier, fresher, more sustainably grown products. We have a long way to go, but keep eating better, and you'll propel the change. 2, take stock of the food system values you hold dear, and then step outside of the silos that all of us find ourselves in, the narrower issues and policies that you specialize in as an expert or as an advocate, and explore some of the fights right next door. Start joining arms. I'm not an expert on childhood hunger. I rely on organizations like the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities and FRAC. But EWG decided long ago that if our values lead us to be concerned about toxic contaminants in children's food, how can we not be concerned that kids have enough food? So for us, the SNAP program for this environmental group is a top priority. We feel it's a critical part of determining the environmental health of the next generation. And then 3, join forces. Advocacy is a team sport. If you find yourself resisting on your own, you may just be moping. Find an organization, local, state, or national, and join. Get to work. Go to events. Pick up the phone. Lobby. Go meet your legislator. Now is the time. Think about not your own shyness or habits or concerns. Think about the people that you have to protect. The hungry kids, the food workers who are not getting a fair shake, and on and on. We are in the early days of the food movement, and yet we've accomplished great things. You've accomplished great things. We all have. We need to enter the momentous debates ahead of us from a position of strength. I will say this from what I understand of the food movement and that you testified to today. First, we will fight. We will fight together for the progress that we have made because that's what movements do. We will protect what we have won. And secondly, knowing that our biggest victories are ahead of us, we know that we'll keep fighting until this movement grows, because that's what makes the difference between a vibrant movement and one that's sitting still. So what did you do in the great food policy war of 2017? Here's what you want to say. I was in the front lines with my friends in the food movement. Grab a seat. I was a happy warrior, and I'll tell you all about it. Thank you.